from the couch. I'm definitely on dad duty with influenza A running through the house, blizzard going on outside, all the things today, but that doesn't stop the news, and that's not going to stop us from bringing the news to you. That's what we do here at OnThePen. If you're new here, I'm Dave Knapp, ManOnMounjaro. That's why I'm here. You are on the pen. Wegovy, Saxenda, Victoza, Trulicity, Mounjaro, Zepbound compound, which is what we're going to talk about. And here's the deal. We've been following this OFA versus FDA lawsuit extremely closely. And there's breaking news in this trial. I always say trial, and I always get nailed by the legal eagles in the community. It's a lawsuit brought on by the OFA, which represents outsourcing facilities associations, to the FDA, who has determined that Tirzepatide is no longer in shortage. Now, where that trial sat was essentially the OFA had motioned, here's Ella, just trying to interrupt the stream, with a shoe in her mouth. Essentially what we have here is the OFA motioned for a preliminary injunction, which would have effectively handcuffed the FDA from the ability to enforce anything over compounded Tirzepatide until this lawsuit was resolved, right? And that basically would have spared it for the next year probably. I can confirm, OnThePen can confirm in this hour that motion has been denied. This is not a surprise. This is what we've kind of been preparing you for. That was likely to happen. The motion has been denied by Judge Mark Pittman in this trial. Now, there's a couple of things to be aware of. First of all, I know the first question that people always have when this stuff happens is, how much longer are you going to get Tirzepatide? And the answer is, I don't know. The answer is definitely open-ended because there are some legal loopholes like custom dosing and custom formulations. That's the difference between 503A and 503B. 503B pharmacies are the ones that, as a trade organization, are bringing this lawsuit. 503As are a little bit different. They've existed forever prior to the Food, Drug, and Cosmetics Act, which established 503A and 503B. 503Bs are outsourcing facilities that are basically factories that can mass produce medications in shortage. That's what this trial's over. 503As are always around to help patients who have a medical need that precipitates getting a branded medication in a compounded form because they can't tolerate a branded version of the medication. They can't tolerate a dye, a specific dose that's offered commercially, right? And so the 503A conversation is off to the side, so some people will continue to be able to get compounds because they may have a medical need that precipitates getting that. That's not what this conversation is about. This conversation is about the mass compounding by these big factories that can crank out tens of thousands of doses a day without the need to hold an individual prescription. 503As have to hold an individual script, like Dave needs Tirzepatide, but he needs Tirzepatide 13.75 milligrams instead of 12.5 or 15, right? Or he has side effects, so he needs a little B12 booster because he gets really fatigued, right? So that's the difference, right? So the judge in this case officially denied the motion for preliminary injunction, which would have protected 503B compounding for the duration of this trial. So that's out the window. So now the FDA had told us a couple of weeks ago that enforcement for 503As was going to go to February 19th or until he ruled on this. So February 19th is long gone. Now he ruled. So 503As have to stop immediately. That means as of this hour, 503As may face enforcement if they're mass compounding this without an individual prescription. Make you sensey? Moving on to the 503Bs. 503Bs are actually on the March 19th deadline because the FDA told us that they could do this until March 19th or the judge ruled, whichever lasted longer. And so obviously March 19th is the longer of the dates. So 503Bs, these big outsourcing facilities, will have for the next 2 weeks the ability to basically move through the rest of their inventory of compound Tirzepatide. So that's what's happening with the case currently the lawsuit between the OFA and the FDA over Tirzepatide. Now, the other thing that's happening in parallel is the OFA has brought another lawsuit, a second lawsuit over compounded semaglutide, Wegovy, Ozempic. It's in the same venue, and believe it or not, the same judge has been assigned to that trial. So I think the easy take is the judge didn't grant a preliminary injunction in this case. He's not going to grant it in the next case. And that's probably the prevailing wisdom, right? That both compound Tirzepatide and compound semaglutide are on the proverbial clock. Now, what we've seen in the last week is we've seen Eli Lilly launch higher doses of Zepbound through Lilly Direct at $499 a month. Just today we learned that Novo Nordisk is launching its own online pharmacy for their products, Novo Care Pharmacy, where you can get branded pens of Wegovy from the 0.5 milligram all the way up to the 2.4 milligram. Do they have a 0.25 in Wegovy? I can't remember. But from the lowest dose to the highest dose, the pens are $499 through Novo, through their Novo Care Pharmacy, and we dropped that news earlier today. So ultimately, what we have is Pharma sort of seeing, it's all choreographed, right? It's like you can kind of see this all play out. But they had this stuff waiting in the wings. I think this is the type of stuff that honestly causes people to have a lot of questions about whether the FDA is acting in our best interest all the time. There's many questions we have, right? I mean, I'm going to go off on a tangent here, but we've covered how most of the FDA, most of the people who have headed up the FDA in every presidential administration for my entire life have gone on to work in C-level positions at Big Pharma, right? That always makes you wonder, are they acting in the best interest of the patients, or are they acting in the best interest of the pharmaceutical companies who will be their future employers, right? An administration lasts 4 years, maybe 8 if you're lucky, but you're always looking, what is the next move? And are you going to be acting in the best interest of the patients, or are you going to be acting in the best interest of the FDA? So that's one thing that we're always looking at and sort of going, does this actually make sense for patients? Now, in terms of the shortage and the FDA and how that's all determined, one of the other things that we've covered very closely here at OnThePen is how this system was never designed for full transparency, right? We don't know, and many of the documents that were filed relating to how Lilly and I'm assuming Novo Nordisk proved that there was ample amounts of medication was just based upon reporting directly from the pharmaceutical companies themselves, and they're self-reporting whether their drugs are in shortage or not. And so it's like this honor system between Big Pharma and the FDA that definitely, and I'm not, immediately yelling corruption on this, but I am yelling like, hey, like who's looking out for the patient here? Because we have been hashtag reporting the shortage this whole time, because that's the tool that the FDA has given us. And then when that data gets presented in court, the FDA said, the FDA and Eli Lilly argue that's anecdotal evidence and it's not tantamount to a shortage. Well, if somebody shows up to a pharmacy and they can't get their medicine within a couple of days, that's a shortage, right? And if you want more nuance built into the reporting system, that's on you, not on us. We're just using the shortage tool that you have given us on your website to report. And so ultimately, first of all, we're almost 10 minutes in, and I would just like to remind you that if you're not following along, please hit the subscribe button below. That's going to help push out the content. We do breaking news in obesity medicine. That's what we do here at OnThePen. All the information that flows for obesity medicine flows out for the medical community, the providers, the prescribers, the pharmacies, or it flows to the investor community, the people that are investing in these companies. It does not flow for the patients. We aim to change that here at OnThePen, and that's what we're doing. So here at OnThePen, we give you patient-centric obesity medicine news. That's what we do. And if that is helpful for you and you have enjoyed our content, or you're here for the first time and you think that may be helpful for you to have more competent and confident conversations with your medical providing team, it is super important that you hit the subscribe button below. We're trying to get to 100,000 followers. I honestly don't know why we don't have 100,000 already. We've been following this stuff now on a granular level for 2 years here at OnThePen, for 2 years. And I think it's just that we got in here early, but I know there's many of you out there who this information is valuable for, helpful for. If it is helpful for you, hit the thumbs up button and just make sure that you subscribe. Now I'm just gonna fly back over the news, what's happening, what's breaking here in this moment, so that you are aware, and then we're gonna wrap this thing up. Essentially what happened in the OFA versus FDA lawsuit over compounded tirzepatide is that what we saw tonight was the judge denied the motion on the OFA, who represents 503B pharmacies, denied their motion for a preliminary injunction. And that's a lot of legal speak, which I'm not a doctor. This isn't medical advice. And for sure, I'm not a lawyer, and this is not legal advice. This is Ella. She is actually a lawyer, a certified golden retriever lawyer, and she is ready to help you get, what's coming to you if you've been harmed by any of these medications. But essentially, sorry, she's eating everything. She eats everything. That's what she does. She's Ella, destroyer of worlds. And now I have lost my train of thought. But anyways, what we're talking about is the OFA versus FDA lawsuit. He's denied the preliminary injunction, and that basically means that compound tirzepatide will not be protected for the duration of this trial, and the 503Bs have basically 2 weeks left of compounding, and then you have the 503As, which their time's up. Their time's up. So if they're mass producing these medications without a prescription in their hand for a custom formulation, 503As are toast. And so honestly, this is like, people have been calling me a pharma shill for telling people this, but honestly, it's another time to take a look at branded medication. It just is like this, the situation that we can do nothing about right now, but definitely take a look at Lilly Direct. Novo Nordisk today announced that they have Novo Care, their new pharmacy, so you can get branded medications for $499 a month, which you only have to go back about 8 months, and that's what compounders were charging until like everybody had a compound, or everybody had a telehealth company that they were representing, and obviously competition drives down cost. And honestly, I think this competition that we've seen from compounds is what forced the hand of Eli Lilly and forced the hand of Novo Nordisk to actually offer their branded medications cheaper to circumvent PBMs, the PBM system, which takes a huge chunk of these of the cost of these medications when the right deals are done behind closed doors. But that is where we need to look right now. That's where we need to look right now, because honestly, this seems like a real uphill battle in the near term. So if this video was helpful, if this information was helpful, I implore you, please hit the thumbs up button. Please share this video somewhere where people might find the information helpful, and it might help them have more competent and confident conversations with your doctors. And please hit subscribe if you're not subscribed. I will take a couple of quick questions here before we jump off. I literally have 2% battery left. So I don't have a ton of time here left, but I will take a couple of questions if you have them. Will they be allowed to use what they have on hand? They have been given an off-ramp now. Tirzepatide was removed from the shortage list in October. They've been given plenty of an off-ramp. They essentially have a couple of more weeks to work through their supply. And honestly, it's like, to work through their supply, we're talking about that's part of the frustration here, is the cost of these medications and the cost to produce them is pennies on the dollar for what they charge. So I mean, some 503Bs may be holding a bag of a couple $1,000 worth of or maybe even $100,000 worth of peptides. Maybe that'd be a ton of peptides. But at the end of the day, they've also made tens of millions of dollars. So Ella does work pro bono. That is correct. She is a pro bono lawyer. She's got a good heart. Other questions that you all have? I'm happy to take a couple more before we jump off here. What about prescriptions that were sent today? It depends on where your telehealth is filling. Have they partnered with a 503A or have they partnered with a 503B? That's really what matters here. And ultimately, today, if you've ordered today, it's probably not a huge deal. What we're looking at is the FDA starting when we wake up tomorrow, the FDA is going to have the ability to enforce stuff. Now, that's another element, and I'm glad you brought that question up because that's the other element to this. Tomorrow, the FDA has to wake up and they have to choose to enforce this stuff. Now, we have a new administration than we did when this was started. So tomorrow and the coming days will telegraph what kind of appetite this administration has to go after compounders. And I think that's going to be a very interesting thread to follow, a thread that we will follow very closely. Semaglutide has got its own lawsuit going, and we'll be following that closely. Go to onthepen.com, sign up for email alerts, and stay on top of all of this information. That is what you need to do to make sure that you have all the latest updates. We're tied in. I mean, we're talking to everybody in this industry. So make sure that you follow along. This will keep you up to date. Before we jump off, 148 people in here, 47 likes. Certainly this information was more valuable to you than that. Hit the thumbs up button before we go, and we will check you on the next one.